have a 1968 Bullitt Mustang replica coming into our shop. It was bought at an auction. One of the customers' complaints was it was using oil and leaking oil and burning oil, and we did a leak down and a compression test, and one of the most obvious signs was it was leaking oil out of number 6 cylinder out of the exhaust header flange and burning on the exhaust. So there was a lot of oil being pumped out of the motor. So we pulled it and we checked it out, and sure enough, the valve guides didn't have the proper seals on it. The valve guides were loose. Fortunately, we were able to save the pistons, so we only had to rehone the cylinders. But the cylinder heads got major surgery. They got bronze guides, they got hardened seats, all new springs and retainers, better push rods. This is a 390 FE motor. It's actually correct for the Bullitt Mustang. It is a very, very good restoration. They just kind of forgot to do a correct engine rebuild on it in some key areas. This engine got a balance job, a rehone, new rings, Molly rings. It got a new timing chain and gears. We kept the camshaft. The profile was good. We're going to go through the carburetor. We're going to put a new clutch in it, a McLeod clutch, and a resurfaced flywheel. It has a Tremec 5-speed, which is a good choice. It has a 9-inch forward rear end and a rear differential, and it's got 355 gears. You can see Roy now assembling the top end of the motor. He's put an oil priming pump to it. It's going to be run by a drill once it gets in the car. Here I am looking over the PCV system with Roy. We're trying to figure out how we can improve on it. It's not exactly plumbed right. So we're going to get the carburetor and look at it and make sure that we got it working correctly. It's always good to run a PCV and a crankcase ventilation system with these early motors. I do most of the carburetors on these things, so we always check the power valves, we check the jetting, we make sure we have the right combination for these engines. Sometimes we run them on the dynos if necessary. This one was not necessary. Here Roy and Roland are installing the motor. They're going to put it in, hook up the trans, the drivetrain, hook up all the accessories. We take great care in covering the fenders with some Mylar film, and then we put fender covers on it so we don't damage the paint. You can't be too careful with these cars. Right now we're putting in a set of headers, and these are big tube headers, and if you've ever had any experience trying to get headers in a 390, very difficult, very slow going. It's even hard to get the spark plugs in and out of an FE motor in a Mustang. But they're in, and we got all the exhaust bolts in. You can see the undercarriage here, nice 9-inch Ford. Here you can see Roy priming the engine. So we've got the spark plugs out. So we're going to be cranking the motor over, and we're going to be priming the motor, and we're checking for oil pressure, make sure it's steady, make sure oil gets to all the passages and the lifters and the rocker shafts that it needs to. So as you can see, the motor's being started and it's running, and we're checking the dwell. We're going to set the timing. Now we're setting up the carburetor to idle at a higher speed, and we're going to break the motor in for about 20 minutes. These rings in this engine are Molly top rings, so they need about 20-30 minutes of run-in time to break in successfully. Now we're adjusting the mixture screws to make sure they respond well. Now we're going over everything, Roy and I, to make sure all the little small things are bolted in correctly, all the details. Now it goes on the alignment shop. Most of these cars we do alignment check. Most of these cars are not aligned correctly when they come in. So we're just giving it a good alignment. We're going to put on Bilstein shocks, And the customer supplied us with a rear sway bar, so we're going to be bolting that onto the rear leaf springs.
Exactly.
They'll get polyurethane bushings on the sway bar. Makes the suspension a little bit stiffer, responds better on turning, handles better. Once James gets all the suspension done and he's completed the alignment, he's going to test drive it to make sure the steering wheel is straight and it doesn't drift left or right. And then I get to road test it for the final runs, and my job is to make sure that it handles well, it sounds good, there's no misfire, the gears shift okay, and it runs well. This was a great car to work on. I saw the movie Bullitt in the theaters, and all of us guys wanted to be Steve McQueen, tearing around the streets of San Francisco in this fastback. So this was a nostalgic project to work on, and the customer was very pleased.